So tonight we're going to talk about power tools for power struggles. This is something that impacted me greatly. My youngest definitely is prone to power struggles, so I have a lot of personal experience here. And so I hope that at the end of the evening you have a couple tools that you can walk away with and be able to implement in your day-to-day lives. And so I'm happy to answer, as I said, you can put questions into the chat. Depending on how active the chat is, I may lose them. So Danielle, if you could keep track of them, that would be great. But sometimes it's great to have those pop up. And the other thing I'd like, if people feel comfortable, is I may have some interactive questions as we go through. So I guess my first interactive question, should you feel comfortable answering, is just to indicate the ages of your children. I will say that the PEP philosophy is age agnostic. So whether you have very small children or children who are out of the house and living on their own, the concepts here apply to everybody. And I actually find them useful in my day-to-day job at work as I interact with other people. So like I said, mine were 12 and 14. So just because I have 12 and 14-year-olds doesn't mean that the concepts won't apply to you. Okay. All right. So what are we going to talk about tonight? Oh, look, great. I see a range of kids, mainly in the 7 to kind of early teen ages. So that's awesome. So tonight we're going to talk about power struggles, and we're going to have a view of power struggles as kind of this battle of wills. And we're going to have this idea of a tug of war, which I think is a great visual for describing power struggles. We're going to talk a little bit about the form in which they can take. And then we have a mnemonic called Drop the Rope, which comes from Alison Schaefer, who's a wonderful Adlerian psychologist or parent educator, excuse me, in Canada, who's written a number of books, Honey, I've Wrecked the Kids, and others. And so if you ever had seen her live, she's a great, very dynamic speaker and illustrates this point exactly. We'll talk about some tools and then we'll get to the Q&A portion of the evening. I would like to, before we get started, I like to baseline everybody and talk about, so PEP, Parent Encouragement Program, uses what's called democratic parenting approach. It's based in Adlerian psychology. Adler was a contemporary of Freud, but had different views on what drove human behavior. And a student of his named Rudolf Dreikers took it and applied it to parenting. And so what we see here are concepts that are evolved from that. And what it roots is in terms of how your children belong to a unit, a group, a dynamic. So that could be a community that they see at school with their friends or at home as well. And to me, as I said in the beginning, the intention really here is to build better relationships with our children. And so as I go through these things, you might sit here and you might wonder, if you're unfamiliar with them, say, Dave, that sounds a lot like being permissive. It sounds like the kids are going to get away with a lot of things. Shouldn't I be, punishing them in order to get them to do what I want? And I would argue that punishment could be effective in the short term, but I think it really degrades the long-term relationship and doesn't provide a space for your children to come to you when they really need help. When there's complex, difficult life decisions they're struggling with, to see you as a parent to kind of help them navigate through is a great place to get to. And that's really, to me, one of the strengths here. So let's get into it. So power struggles, a battle of wills. And so I mentioned it's the tug of war. And so one way that you can stop a tug of war is to not get involved. So when we talk about dropping the rope, if you want to envision a power struggle, that power struggle is you can get rid of easily by refusing to contribute to the game. Okay, so if you refuse to play the game of tug of war, then all of a sudden you remove yourself from the power struggle, and you can get to the real issue at hand, which is, what is the problem? What are what we call the needs of the situation, and how do you address them? And I'm sure all of us have been in power struggles before with our children or others. And I think the real thing is, we never solve these things in the heat of the moment. So what we have to do is we have to extricate ourselves from the struggle itself, look at the scenario, and work with our children, look at the scene from their perspective, and offer choices that we feel comfortable as parents pursuing. The answer isn't let them do whatever they want. The idea is really to grow them and to get to a healthy place. So power struggles don't have to be active, yelling, fighting, but they certainly are. So here's some examples of active power struggles. You have children who lie to you. They may not follow the rules, argue with you, throw temper tantrums. You know, they can be passive as well. So that could be the child who drags their feet getting out of the house, drives the situation by knowing that if you're in a rush, you need to get somewhere and you're trying to get out the door, or you want them to go to bed because you're going somewhere. By them dragging their feet, pulling everything out, slows down. It's a way of them controlling the situation. So while I'm chatting, what gets you? You know, for me, with my youngest, it was really this arguing, this tantrum. You know, he felt like I was trying to control him, and his personality is such that he wants to be in control. And so, well, as we talked through the evening, we talked through some of those tools. You know, one way I addressed that was by giving him what we call positive power. So he felt a need or desire to contribute, to control a situation. So rather than using it in a negative sense, I use that in a positive sense. Okay, so apathy, yeah, that laziness, the dawdleness, yelling, that's great. So one way that you could know that you're in a power struggle is you have that feeling inside of you saying, I can't let this kid win. There's no way. I'm the parent, they're the child. They can't win this. I am going to defeat them. If you feel that way, that's a very clear sign that you're in a power struggle, whether it's active or passive. And that's a great key. And as there's other classes that we have within PEP, and there's other things that drive child behavior and then allow you to find different solutions to the problem at hand. Yeah, I'm seeing here opposition, defiance over simple tasks, or arguing and making excuses, yelling, apathy. They're great. I will tell you that one of the things that drove me to PEP in the beginning for me was anger. So I would get frustrated with my children, you know, be tired, be long end of the day. They were little. We'd start to argue. I would yell, and then he would scream back. We get into a shouting match, and it would escalate very quickly into a power struggle that I just realized this is not the relationship I want to have with my child. It's not being productive, and it's not helping any of us. And when I found PEP, I found some things that allowed me to kind of work through that and to build a great relationship that I have today. It's not all, you know, sunshine and roses over here, but I feel like we have tools, and we're working together as a family to address those. Okay, so the mnemonic that I wanted to talk about tonight, drop the rope. As I said, this idea from Allison Schaefer. It's easy to remember. Again, if you think of the power struggle as a tug of war. So the first one is diagnosing. Okay, so what is the issue? As I said, when you get into a power struggle, what you want to do is you want to extricate yourself from the power struggle, because you're never going to solve anything in the heat of the moment. There's a lot of emotions at bay. You're driven to react. A lot of the times I will say to my children, you know, I need to take a breath right now because I don't want to say something I'm going to regret. And in the midst of a power struggle, it's too easy to say something that's reactive, hurtful, escalates the situation, and you're not going to solve the issue. So you diagnose it, you figure out the roles and the responsibilities. So what is the parent responsible for? What is the child responsible for? What's the child's role? What's the parent's role? Offering an empathetic ear. Sometimes just listening can be a very powerful tool to get through the power struggle. And then the last one is that idea I talked about for my son that was very successful, which is this idea of positive power. So I take their tendency towards controlling a situation, to want to be in power, and say, let me give you tools that allow you to do that in a positive sense. So you no longer have an outlet to feel like you're going to need to get them in a negative sense. So I have a video to share that kind of starts to illustrate, I think, a scenario that's kind of typical in houses. So let me pull this up here, share, and here we go. Oh, excuse me, I had the wrong one. Bear with me 1 second. Here we go. This one.
Sarah, put the computer away and start your homework.
I did already.
What are you talking about? You haven't opened a book all afternoon.
At school, you're always accusing me.
Okay, fine. This is not my problem. You're going to have to deal with your bad grades on your own.
All right. So did that scene seem familiar to anyone here? You know, I know that screens are definitely a point of contention. And I know that these things play out. So it definitely is a scenario that we'll be able to talk about this evening. But, you know, some of the things that I saw there came in, there was accusing, the child felt attacked, they're defending back. And then you get to a point where, again, you know, figuring out what the issue at hand was really around homework and getting homework solved, not about the computer. The computer was a piece in the middle. And so we start to argue over it, and then the parent gives up and, you know, lets the child on their own devices, which may or may not be useful depending on what the scenario is. So we're going to move on, and we're going to start talking about the diagnosis aspect of this. All right. So first one, how do you know, right, you're in a power struggle? I talked about this before. Yeah, the first thing she did was grab the computer. And again, that's a reactive thing that gets them tied up in the moment. So you need to diagnose your feelings to make sure, like I said, to know that you're in a power struggle. And again, it's not always active, and especially in those passive scenarios. So you feel angry, and you need that deep-seated emotional feeling of, I am not gonna let this child win. I am going to make them pay, or I'm gonna make them do what I want because I'm the parent. He always thinks that you're right, and there's that resistance and fighting. So a lot of the times in PEP, what we talk about is, what's your gut reaction? So if your gut reaction is, I'm not gonna let this child win, and then like the mom in the example there, she dives in, she grabs the computer, and what's the child's response? So the child's response is to start actually pulling back. Now they're in, you know, a literal tug of war with the computer as the piece of it. Now the mom dropped the rope in a sense, but I don't feel like she resolved the scenario that we saw there. There wasn't a happy ending. The mother said, okay, well, it's up to you. Like, you know, if you get bad grades, you know, that's on you. I have nothing to do with it. And I think there's a positive way to end that experience. And so by diagnosing and seeing through that gives you an opportunity to be like, aha, I'm in a power struggle. And I will tell you that when I first learned this and I started to apply it, because every day I would have opportunities to practice it, I would consistently be like, I'm in the middle of a power struggle as I'm like, you know, in that scenario, grabbing the computer, pulling and yelling at the child. And it took me a little while. And especially, I will tell you that if you go home and at the end of the night, we're going to ask some things that you're willing to try at home. You're going to go home, you're going to try these things, and your kids may be like, what's going on? And they may act weird, and it can take a little bit of time as everybody starts to understand where you're getting with this. So please be patient and look at those small progress. And I think that if you get into the midst of a power struggle and you're fighting and you're arguing, and you recognize that you're in a power struggle in the heat of it, that's great, because now you have this awareness of the situation, and then you can start to get to the next aspect of it, which is that dropping the rope, walking away. Okay, so if you find yourself in a power struggle, what can you do? You're not going to solve, as we started, you're not going to solve the problem in the heat of the moment. So you could mumble and walk away. That's a great one. You can be like, well, I had this thing and leave. In that scenario where we had the parent, you could say something like, okay, well, you know, I'm not willing to talk about this right now, but after dinner, we can sit down and have a conversation. You know, you can leave without continuing to exacerbate the situation and allow everyone to calm down and come back and talk about what's going to be a healthy solution to the issue. So you've diagnosed the problem, you've identified that you're in a power struggle, you emotionally drop the rope, and you get yourself back to a calmer state. So part of it now is to identify what's the problem. And the great thing that I like to think of is you want to distill it down to its essence. You want to try and think of it in 2 words. So how can I describe the scenario? What are the needs of the situation, right? Remove people from it. So instead of saying to your child, hey, Kobe, you need to stop doing what you're doing, because now all of a sudden he gets defensive. He feels like there's a personal attack on him. And I could say is, homework needs to get done, right? That's the root of the problem. So how do we figure out to make sure that homework's getting done and that screens aren't getting in the way of homework getting done? So in that scenario, we can have a conversation about what are the roles, what are the responsibilities? So we've identified the problem at hand, which is around homework needing to get done. So what roles do the children have and what are the responsibilities of the adult? So I want you to think about 3 buckets of problems that exist in your life. Okay, there's going to be a bucket of problems that are just owned by you. There's going to be a bucket of problems that are owned by your children. There's going to be a bucket of problems that are shared by you and your child. I would like to offer that you move as many of the problems that are solely owned by you out of your bucket and move them over to your child's bucket. I talked about the fact that, part of this is about relationship building. There's also an aspect of training your children to learn how to handle scenarios like this in the real world. So there's an active modeling piece of this. So as you work through, not only are you helping to solve the power struggle in the moment, you're giving your kids tools for them to interact with others in the world, to help solve their own problems, to identify what's the root of the issue, to avoid power struggles with others, and to help solve problems and move forward. And so these are great opportunities to consciously or subconsciously train your children. Okay, so part of that is allowing your children to own problems and allows you as a parent to set the things that are truly important to you, right? The things that come to, I don't say risk of life, but that are the big problems. Because if you start to try to manage everything, you're not doing your kids a service, and you really want that power. Power is a bad word to use in the scenario. You want the attention and the ownership of your kids in the process to be leveraged when it's really, really important. Okay, so the aim here is to teach. So if you resist the micromanagement and you watch your children work through things, they learn through those struggles, they grow, and it's that opportunity to figure it out on their own. So I'll give an example. It happened very recently. My 12-year-old son, starting to grow some facial hair, probably didn't really need to shave, but for him, it was this, I think a milestone step where he wanted to learn how to shave. And so about 6-7 months or so ago, got him a razor, taught him how to shave, gave him the tools, we walked through it, we practiced. And, it took a really, really long time before it got to a point where we needed to shave again. So school photos were coming up and he was, decided he was going to go shave. And so for whatever reason, he's 12 years old, he decided he was going to shave it up here on his forehead. Don't ask me why. And he slipped and basically shaved off part of his eyebrow. So he comes downstairs and says, Dad, I screwed up. I shaved my eyebrow. Now I could have sat there and been like, Kobe, how could you be so stupid? Now you look like a moron. You have your pictures. It's totally ruined. And then he would have just reacted and started to yell at me, and it would have evolved into this power struggle, right? But that was an opportunity for him to learn. What he learned out of that scenario was way more powerful than anything I could have taught him or set a rule or gotten into an opportunity for the power struggles. And the very next day he had this, photo. So now he's gonna have this photo to memorialize it forever, and that will stick with him. So so he learned by doing, and so by moving it out of my bucket, not into a shared bucket, into a bucket that he owns, he came to me, and but if he had known that I was going to react strongly, then maybe he might not have come to me. So I want him to be able to come to me when he's struggling with those peer pressure issues, alcohol, drugs, school, friends, relationships, those things that are big and important. Those are stuff that I want him to be able to feel like he can come and talk to me about. Okay. So it's just giving him opportunities and then training and giving responsibility. So I like to think our children aren't born with a giant manual where, I'm 10, so I'm going to turn to page, 1000, and there I go. All the stuff I need to do is written out. So there's opportunities for us as parents to train our children, to teach them the tools they need to be successful. So that can be direct things, like in this example here of the child doing laundry. It could be indirect things like, inadvertently teaching them how to handle and manage problems, like we said here. Again, power struggles indicate there's an issue at hand. When we get angry, there's indicators. We're getting angry about something. So what's the thing that's causing the anger, and how do we help address that root problem rather than the issue at the moment? There's a great quote, which is, you should never do for a child what they can do for themselves. So if you find yourself doing something that your child is capable of doing, I would offer that you stop and think and say, should I be doing this? Should I allow them to proceed? And if you see they're headed down a path of failure, if they decide that they're going to be like shaving their head here and think they're going to get their eyebrow, maybe consider the experience that they're going to gain from it, if it's safe, to learn and grow on their own. Okay, so there's a responsibility of that child and there's responsibility of us. Hopefully that's making sense. Okay, so what are we going to do next? Okay, well, the next one is going to offer a sympathetic ear. Okay, when I use some language when we talked about the laptop there back and forth, when I said I'm not willing. Okay, so I'm not willing to fight with you. I don't want to have an argument over this. Okay, get to a point where you're calm, you're in the right frame of mind, and say, okay, sounds like this is something that's important to you because of how you're acting. Talk to me about it. I'm here to listen. And you don't have to agree with them. So I'll use screens as an example. So let's say that the child, was offered an hour of screens a day, and they're off on their computer for 3 hours, and you come downstairs and you're really frustrated that they're on their computer, and you react the way that the parent did in that scenario. You start yelling, maybe there's throwing of things, stomping off, slamming of doors. And the issue here, again, is screen time. So you could walk up to the child at a point when they're in a good state of mind where you can have a conversation. You say, it sounds to me like screen time is important to you. What about screen time is important? Okay. And then you just listen and you hear, they may want to use it as a way of connecting with their friends. They may like to use it as a way to deconnect, decompress. They may want to watch videos. So now you're understanding what their motivations are, and they feel like they have an opportunity to be heard. Now they may say, what I want to do is I want to spend 7 hours a day, every day, on my computer. Just because that's what they want, that doesn't mean what they're going to get. So as a parent, you get to set the boundaries. You can say, I'm not willing to allow for that. I'm willing to allow for thinking about extending screen time if you can agree to figure out how we're going to manage them, right? In a way that doesn't put the onus as me as the parent to do that. So you're not going to agree with them. Again, a lot of times people look at this process and they're going to say, Dave, I feel like I'm letting my kids get away with everything. People who come from an authoritarian parenting environment or prefer an authoritarian parenting style are going to look at this and be like, you're letting those kids walk all over you. But you're never going to solve the problem in the moment. You're looking at, hey, we're going to get calm. We're going to figure out what the problem is today. We're going to address and solve that problem. And we're going to work to figure and prevent the problem from occurring in the future. And that's really what this is all about. And that's a long process that's going to take time to get there. And that isn't, instantaneous. And the gratifying piece from an authoritarian standpoint is you might feel like you've won. But I think in a lot of ways, people are losing out. Okay, moving on. So the last piece of the mnemonic drop is positively empower. Okay, so what we've done is we've diagnosed the problem. We've identified, yes, I'm in a power struggle right now. You've thought about first you've extricated yourself from that scenario. Give yourself an opportunity to calm down on your end and your child's end. And you figure out what the root of the problem is. You've thought about roles and responsibilities, training opportunities so that your kid can figure out how to contribute positively and grow. You've offered an empathetic ear so you can understand where they're coming from. And a lot of the times, especially for children who are prone to power struggles or wanting to be in control of the situation is probably a better way to put it, like my sons, especially my younger one, is to give positive power, to put them in control. When my kids were real little and Kobe was prone to power struggles, especially when it came to cleanup time and there's toys strewn across the floor, didn't want to do it. I will tell you right now, he continues to drag his feet. So when it's his turn to do, if he didn't cook dinner and he has to clean up from dinner, he's dragging his feet. He's off doing something else. Once we got to empty the dishwasher, clean stuff, he instantly finds a million things to do, right? So now he's being passive. So what I would do is I would put him in control. I say, Kobe, you're in charge tonight of cleanup. When we clean up the toy room, okay? Mom, Bennett, and I, we're all here. Tell us what we need to do. And he said, okay, Mom, you're gonna put away all the dinosaurs. Dad, you're gonna put away the cars. I'm gonna take care of the action figures. And Bennett, you're gonna clean up the train tracks. And then we would put them all on the table. And then Kobe would, assign roles. Excuse me. So he's learning leadership. I am giving him an opportunity to contribute in a positive way. Excuse me. And removing an opportunity for the power struggles to occur because I'm heading him off at the beginning. So not only avoiding the power struggle, but giving him ways of figuring out how to benefit. Excuse me. So how can you do that? You can give limited choices. This is especially effective for those of you who have young children. Is you can say, would you like to A or B? And that could be as simple as saying, would you like to do your homework now? Or are you going to do your homework after we eat dinner? Okay. Or would you like to brush your teeth now? Or do you want to brush your teeth after we read our book? As they get older and they can understand and their responsibilities, their maturity increases, you can increase those choices. The choices available to a 14-year-old or a 15-year-old are going to be different than those available to a 5-year-old. But a number of years ago, my brother, who has 3 daughters, they are ages right now 7, 5, and 3. When the 5-year-old was about 3, her mother opened the refrigerator and said, "What do you want for a snack?" Because she said, "I'm hungry." And she's like sat there staring, and then mom started being like, "Come on, we're room's getting cold. What do you want? You said you're hungry. Here's the food choices, and to the child, it was overwhelming. And so I said, "Hey, Lily, would you like to have strawberries or do you want to have carrots?" She said strawberries. So it took this really big thing and narrowed it down to kind of 2 small choices. Now, as she's gotten older, it's gotten easier because she's got to handle those situations, but we've given these limited choices that are appropriate. It still happens with my 12-year-old. He has a whole lot of decision-making process, and sometimes he gets into a power struggle because he gets frustrated not being able to pick when he had to pick shoes for school most recently. And so there's a lot of times we came close to a power struggle when I was like, "I'm willing to take you to the store so you could choose." And then he felt like he couldn't choose and it was getting pressured and he wanted to have some time to come back and think. And so that limited choices look different than if he was 5 or 15. Okay. When then is great. So, go back to Kobe with the cleaning the dishes. So if Kobe said, I need to go clean my room, which wouldn't have happened, but we'll use it as an example. Okay. Or I need to do my homework, right? You could say, well, when the dishes get put away, then you can go clean your room. When the dishes get put away, then you can go hang out with your friends. When the dishes get put away, then you can go play with the dog. Okay. Another great one too is called just use one word, right? So my youngest, sometimes you get into his pajamas, you just take off his shirt and his shorts and there you go. And clothes will get strewn across the floor. And I could just walk into a room and say, "Kobe, I see shorts on the floor." Or, "Boys, I see shorts on the floor." And everybody knows that it was Kobe. And so Kobe will stand up, find the shorts, and go put them away. Right? If I had said, "Kobe, you left your shorts on the floor again. You're driving me crazy. There's shorts everywhere. I can't believe it. So frustrating. You got to stop it." Right? How is he going to react? He's going to yell. He's going to stomp off. Right? But the problem was the fact that there was clothes on the floor. It wasn't that I needed to get into an argument with him about it. The clothes needed to get put away. So let me just identify the problem and say, there you go. Or dishes. And the kids sit there and they stare at you and be like, "Dishes." Right? You're focusing on the problem. You're not focusing on them. You get there. Okay. Trading services. What does that mean? So trading services is an opportunity to be like, I'll use the chores as an example. So in our house, there's a variety of things that need to get done all the time. So let's say it's taking out the trash and cleaning up from dinner and cooking dinner. And so if Kobe didn't want to clean up from dinner, but the trash had to get taken out, and my week was to take out trash, I could say, Kobe, I'm willing to do the dishes if you're willing to go take the trash out. The needs of the situation of the fact that dishes are dirty, have to get clean, trash has to get put outside. So have an opportunity to give them an opportunity to say, hey, how do I do this? There's something right now that I don't feel totally willing to do. And that's up to you. That doesn't mean you have to offer to do all the stuff they don't like to, but rather gives you an opportunity to allow them, if you're willing to, there as a way of learning how to negotiate. So I have another video to show you. I apologize to all of you. I forgot a video. I'm going to go back to this roles and responsibilities, and we're going to watch video number 2 first, and then we're going to come back to the power one and watch number 3. So here we go. We're going to watch video number 2. And once I get it up, and it is, oh, come on, 2. All right, here's video number 2.
Do your homework. Ugh, pick up this mess or I'm going to take this thing away. Sarah, put your shoes on or you'll miss the bus. Sarah, put your dishes in the dishwasher before you play with your toys.
Okay. So there's a lot of micromanagement there. You know, the mom telling the child what they should be doing. Put your shoes on. We got to go. Do your homework. Okay. When in that scenario, what's the responsibility of the children? Again, you don't want, as a parent, to train your children to allow you to tell them, if we're going to talk about schoolwork, when schoolwork needs to get done. I mean, I'm sure none of us, I mean, maybe you can raise your hand if I'm wrong, but I don't know if anybody here wants to be the person who sits there every day looking over their child's shoulder saying, you know, did you do this today? All right, well, because tomorrow we have math and Friday there's a science test. So you got to study for that one. And you got to read this book. Did you do that? Right? I mean, if they need help with that, great. But part of that is the training aspect. So the role and the responsibility of the child here is to take ownership of those things. And in those scenarios that we saw, the parent was not providing the child those opportunities. Okay. Back to positive empowerment. We're going to watch video number 3 now. Get it up. 3, 4. Hang on one second. 4, 2, 1, 3.
Sarah, you can either take the ball outside to play with or find another toy to play with inside. It's up to you. You decide.
Okay. All right, so what did she not do there? Anybody catch what she didn't do? You can put it in the chat if you want. Right, what she didn't do, she didn't say, you can't play ball in the house. You're going to break stuff. This, you know, that needs to go outside. Go now. Yeah, she didn't attack her. She gave her a choice. Okay. You can either do this or that. So that's a version of when, then, or limited choices by saying, you know, either you can do it here or you can do it there. So when my kids were younger, they're boys. They like to use language associated with bodily functions all the time in places that weren't appropriate. So we'd say, you know, either you can choose not to use those words at the table, or you can go to the bathroom And you can use those there because that's where we use those types of words. You know, you're giving them the opportunity and they lose the stick to poke you, right? Because part of this, again, is to give your children, remove the things, right? So once your kids know what's important to you, now all of a sudden they know if they want to consciously or subconsciously attack you, they know where the chinks in your armor are. They know what's important. So again, I'll use, since I just used the example, the potty mouth. So if they knew that that was important to me and I would react strongly and they wanted to hurt me, they could start using those all the time. But if I give them the opportunity, so if we go back to the ball example, if playing ball inside the house elicted a huge response from mom, then all of a sudden, if I say, yeah, it's okay to play ball, you can either choose to do it outside or you can do it over there. Those are your choices. Go at it. The founder of PEP, Linda Jessup, had a lot of kids, and both adopted and of her own. And there was a lot of sibling rivalry and fighting. And there was points at which she would just say to the children, all right, if you want to fight, you can go outside. There's no fighting inside the house, but have at it in the backyard. And the kids go outside, they'd be like, okay. And then all of a sudden it dropped because there was other things that really were driving those sibling rivalries and fighting. Okay, talked about the trading services. Before I get to the next two, we're going to watch a video. So we're going to watch video 4, share. Hang on.
Sarah, when the clothes are put in your hamper and the cards are put away, then you can play on the computer.
Hello?
Okay. All right, so there's a great example of the when then. I will say, if you with younger children, there's going to be a lot of what Linda Jess will call social workers, where you are involved in the process, but you're helping to train your kids to learn. And over time, it gets less and less and less. Okay. The next one is
me, Dave.
yeah.
I don't know if everyone else heard the video. Were they able
Oh,
to
I
hear it?
apologize. Yeah.
No worries.
So what she said is she said, you know, to her daughter, when the cards are picked up, then you can play with the computer. And then that was it. Computer got handed to her, and the child realized, okay, well, I'm going to clean these up. And again, these are all expectations that you can figure out outside of the process. And so, you know, these last two are going to be great. So the encouragement piece is PEP's middle name. We have a lot of opportunities to explore that topic in further detail. But the point of it is to take children who may not feel, well, yes, she did. Someone commented that she took the computer and it wasn't handed to her. That's true, but it's not a grabbing and a forceful taking away or a fighting between the two. It's, as the parent, you're setting the limit. And the limit here is saying, hey, you know, when the cards are picked up, then you can play on the computer. Or I'm willing to hold the computer and wait here while you clean up. Okay. So, okay. So I'm going to get to that question about the yelling in a second, but I want to talk about the encouragement piece before I forget. So the encouragement piece really is a way to be specific, talk to your children, say, I see, you know, I saw a child who did something. So a lot of the times we talk about praise versus encouragement within PEP, and people view praise as a positive reinforcement. The issue with praise is that it becomes an external motivator for children. So you will say, okay, good job. The child may not know what really drove them to do a good job, and it's something that had to be given to them externally. So now they're dependent on somebody else to give them that validation. And what we're trying to build is this internal resilience. And so by being specific and talking about things that you see, describing a situation, are encouraging ways of allowing your children to see that, hey, the challenges they took on, rather than getting frustrated, yelling, and turning it into an argument, are opportunities for them to grow, and that you've recognized that, and it becomes an internal motivator, and they no longer are required to have somebody say, good job. If you find, like my kids did it when they're younger, they'd come home, did I do a good job? I was like, well, what do you think? Tell me about it. How did it work? Okay. And the last one is problem solving. And again, that's the root of all we're talking about tonight, is that idea of figuring out what's the essence of the problem and figuring out how do we address that. And that's going to change from things like getting your teeth brushed or getting out of the house in the morning, for kids of all ages, to more complex issues around who your kids hang out with, how they're doing in school, and what are the choices that they're making. And it's getting to that root of the problem there. So I have one more video to share, and then a couple quick slides, and then we'll have an opportunity for some Q&A, and we'll talk a little bit about that yelling, okay? So the last video I had, you're gonna see some examples in this video of that encouragement. And I want you to notice how she talks about what she sees in the scenario, as opposed to just saying, hey, you did great. Share, let me find the video. That's two, here's the 5. Okay, hopefully you guys will hear this.
Sarah, it looks like you got yourself out of bed, took off your pajamas, got on your pants and your shirt, and you're almost completely ready to go to school.
Yeah, and now I'm gonna check the weather, see if any of my rain boots.
So hopefully you guys heard that. Yes, no? Okay, great. Okay, again, she described the situation. She said, I see a child who was able to get themselves out of bed, changed, dressed, ready to go, and the child's motivated to figure out what they're gonna go do next, okay? So that's really the end goal. You know, my kids, it took this a long time, but you know, for the rule for the longest time was, hey, if you wake yourself up, get yourself dressed, make breakfast, get ready for school, then the time you have remaining is you time. And now they're 12 and 14, you know, they get up, they go through the whole of those motions, and they own that whole process. And it's really removed for our family, those power struggles. And you may have different ones. So these slides are going to be available to you from Danielle in a PDF form, should you want them. But the goal here is peace, right? Harmony. Again, you may feel that the scenario, you feel like you're letting people get away with, you know, a lot in this scenario, but you're opting not to try to address the issue in the heat of the moment when you're not going to solve something, when you're reactive and emotional, and you're really getting to this optimal family dynamic. And if it feels like that's an impossible situation from where you are right now, I will tell you that it's doable. It's going to take time. And if you have children who are on the older end of the spectrum and you've been parenting a certain way for a while, it will take a little bit, but I think you'll really get that empowerment. And we have a whole host of other courses there. So there's some books that you can read. Allison Schaefer is great. She's got a podcast as well. Linda Jessup, as I said, the founder of PEP, has written a book. Tina Crane Bryson and Dan Siegel are also excellent. Dan Siegel is a psychologist, talks a lot about neurobiology and brains and reactive behavior. And this last one, How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen While Kids Are Talking, are good as well. So these are available. There's also other PEP webinars. So there's a coupon code here that you'll get when you get the PDFs. We're going to have a panel session with a number of dads talking about anger, which is closely coupled with power struggles, because if I get angry and I start to yell, then my kids are going to react a similar way. And these master classes down here. So I talked about encouragement. It's a way of talking differently to build that internal resilience in your children. And this redefining discipline helps you to figure out how you can set limits. So I talked a little bit about that. It's not something we had a lot of opportunity to get into, and but that's something that we get to explore and more. So with that, that's all that I had to share with you from a webinar perspective this evening.